Hello and welcome to SEDA Online. Delighted to have you here. I'm Jane, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about speaking English in Ireland. So I just want to know a little bit, first of all, from you. What do you think about English in Ireland? What's your impression of the English that's spoken here? Well, please write it down in the comments box because I'd love to hear what you think. But what I guess you're going to say is that it's very different. Like there are some people that you understand, there are some people that you just don't understand. Then there are lots of speakers of native English language speakers, and then there are speakers of English using English as a second language here in Dublin. We have all types. But today, I just kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about the influence of Celtic language on modern day English. And then a little bit about the influence of the Irish language on today's English in Ireland. So not the English that everybody understands, but the English that Irish people understand here in Ireland. And then I just wanted to give you a sample of Cork English, which I think you might find quite interesting. I hope you will. So, first of all, my first question is, how do people say hello in Ireland? Like, of course we say hello, of course we do, but we also say other things. What do we say? So, do you know this? That we say, well, in Dublin here we always say how are ya? And like in the southeast it might be well boy. And up north you go boitja, which is how's about you? How are you? How's about you? How are you about? What's about? What's going on? Like how's about you? About you. And then in Cork you might get how's it going? How's it going, boy? And so there's all kinds of different things. But how are you? How is it going? How about you? Those are the kind of different structures that we use. And then in the rural equivalent of how is it going is how is she cutting? How's she cutting? So she is like used in Irish language instead of it much more, and cutting means going. So how's she cutting is how are you doing? How's it going? And you answer grand altogether, or surviving. So those are just like typical Irish culture, English responses and English greetings. So how's it going today? How's about you? But now let's move on and look at influences of the Celtic language on global English. So did you ever stop to wonder, like, what came before English here in the islands of Ireland and Britain? And did you ever also stop to think about English and its structure and wonder, like, that do that we use, like what do you do and how do you do it? Like, what other languages use that do auxiliary, and how strange and alien is that to you? And where did this do structure come from? Because it's not common in other people's languages and other languages apart from English. And then my last question is, like, how easy do you find it to remember to use do in questions and negatives? And this is like just sort of how easy is it for you to internalize this quite unique language structure? Because like often, I'll listen to people who have got great English, like they've got a wide vocabulary range and complete understanding of grammar, but they still forget to use the do form. Like even on the telly when you see important politicians and things like that, people like that from Europe, and they're still just reversing the order to get to a question, and like, oops, there you forgot the do form. And the thing about it is now that I was just looking at this book by an American called John McWhorter called The Language Hoax, and he describes how the do form is probably from the Celtic language. Like, not everybody believes this, but it's a possibility that the Celtic language, they use do. And then when the Anglo-Saxons, the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes, they came over and invaded England and then moved into Ireland, and they brought their language, Old English, with them. But because there weren't so many of them, they were aggressive invaders, but there weren't a huge number of them. They then integrated with the local people in Britain and Ireland, who were Celtic people with Celtic languages, and they merged the two languages together. So the Celtic ideas, the Celtic concepts were built into this Anglo-Saxon language, and some people suggest that that's where the do verb came from. So like we're responsible for this strange do that you have to learn now when you learn English, this do that nobody else really uses in other languages. So it's quite a unique and strange auxiliary verb. So take a look at that book if you're interested in reading more about English and its beginnings. So then when we're talking about today's English, I just want to look at the influence of Irish language, not all Celtic languages, because the Anglo-Saxons and the Celtic languages would have been like French. It would have been, well, there's French Gaelic as well, but Scottish Gaelic, Welsh Gaelic, Irish Gaelic. There's lots of different languages that from that period, which still exist today in more developed forms. But to look then at a later development where English, standard English, had been brought into Ireland, and then Irish people were learning English because just like today, English is the language of commerce and trade. And so if, the Irish people, they wanted to become wealthy and be successful, they were moving out of agrarian society, out of the countryside, they needed to speak English in order to get good jobs. And so they brought their Irish structures and their Irish, their understanding of language, their grammatical structures, and imposed them onto standard English. So for example, I'm after doing something, I'm after doing that. Have you heard people here in Ireland saying that? So like, instead of saying, I've just found €1, they would say, oh, I'm after finding €1 on the road today. Have you heard any Irish people saying that? So standard English, you would say, I have just found €1. I have just done something. Whereas Irish influenced English will say, I'm after doing that. So this is like an Irish structure imposed, literally translated into English, and then used quite commonly here in Ireland. Another influence of Irish Gaelic here in Ireland is that I wonder if you've noticed that some Irish people don't say yes and no very much. They have just a more roundabout and longer way of responding yay or nay. And this would be interesting to note that Irish Gaelic doesn't have a yes and a no. There's no yes and no. There's different structures within the language, of course, to say yes and no, but there is no yes and no like that. And so it's the same as Chinese as well, is that you, in order to say if you agree or if you like something or if you can do something, you just repeat the verb back in the positive or the negative form. Like, can you swim? I can. Do you like tomato juice? I don't. Are you coming? I amn't. So you put the positive or the negative form of the verb in order to be affirmative or negative, rather than using yes and no. So you see that actually in Irish society, that people speak like that. And this is influenced by Irish Gaelic. So yeah, maybe they say, the question here we've got is, are you coming? And then, no, I amn't. Well, amn't, do you know that word, amn't? So that's like a form from the verb to be. So you have I am, you are, he is, we are, you are, they are. And then if you put that into the negative, you have I'm not, you're not, he is not, we are not, you are not, they are not. But as you know, we don't, very, very rarely would say that in such a long form. We would shorten it down. And so we can shorten it down to I'm not, you're not, he's not, we're not, you're not, they're not. But you have another way of shortening the verb forms as well. When you say, you aren't, he isn't, we aren't, you aren't, they aren't. And what about the I form? Can you not say, I amn't? Well, actually, interestingly, amn't is not standard English. You just can't say amn't in standard English. You have to say, I'm not. But Irish people say, I amn't. So that's a kind of interesting irregularity, a regional difference. So another thing is about the singular and plural you. So how do you feel about that? Like in your first language, is there a difference between singular and plural you? I imagine that there is. And in this case, do you find it strange to use you for plural and you for singular? Well, in Ireland, a lot of English-speaking people do find this strange because they've gone back to the Irish language and they use ye for singular and ye's or use for plural. So this is very common actually in Irish English to hear people saying ye. What do ye do for the weekend? Why don't yous come with us? And so they're making, in spoken English now, of course, not in written English, but in spoken English, you get this ye and yous coming out as a kind of an Irish language idea that English language grammar is not the way it should be, and so it's being pushed on a spoken form towards having a plural and singular you form. And then some phrases. Well, here's one. We say, what's the story? What's the story is like a literal translation, cod an scale, where story really actually means news. So literally translated, like if you use that phrase in Irish, you mean like what's your news? But when you translate it into English and you say, what's the story? That's actually not standard English. That's not correct. And so much time, I'm sure your teacher has been telling you when you confuse the words history with story, that no, history is when you have something that happened in the past, like historical fact, something that's over, that's history, whereas a story is something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that it's a constructed narrative. But actually here we're saying, what's the story? And it doesn't mean either of those two things. It's borrowed from Irish language and it's sort of incorrectly borrowed, if you like. Another interesting one is like to give out about someone. I'm sure if you're working with Irish people, you'll hear them talking. They're giving out all the time. So what does it mean if an Irish person is giving out? Stop giving out. What's most curious about this actually is that if you ask Irish people, they'll tell you that to give out is standard English and it means to complain. But in fact, it's not standard English. It's from the Irish and it means complain. And so we've taken another Irish phrase, translated it literally, and adopted it in English. And then here's another one. Who's your man? Who's your man? And who's your one? And this is Irish English. And it's like if you don't know somebody's name, then hey, you know that person over there, who's that? We would say in like standard English, who's that person? Who is he? Who is she? What's that person's name? But in Irish you say, who's your man? Who's your one? And you don't mean that that man belongs to you or even that it's your friend. It could be a complete stranger or it could be your best friend. It just means the person, that person. So then if you say, don't give out about your one, that means don't complain about that person. And so that's like a really Irish English thing to say. Then yoke is another word that's very commonly used in Ireland, and it just means a thing. So standard English, it would be like a thingamajig or whatchamacallit. But here in Ireland, we say yoke. Hand me that yoke. And that just means anything, that noun, that thing. So last of all, we're just going to finish off with the last one, which is like, what's the crack? So this word is interesting too, because like I read anyway, that this word crack used to be Scottish. Then it was imported into Ireland, and now it's claimed as an Irish word, but it's actually an Irish word. It's claimed to be like an Irish concept that's come into the English language, where in fact it was an English word that went into the Irish language and then became Irish, and then has come back out into English language. So the point about it is that language is always evolving, always changing, and taking influences from different places. So what's the crack? Something that's fun, something that's lively, energetic. What's going on? What are you doing? Good crack. It was great fun. A word like that. I'm sure you know that word. So I just want to give you an example of a regional accent from Ireland. So I thought, well, these two Irish stars of the 2016 Rio Olympic Games are a really good example of regional Irish English. Do you know who they are? So it's the O'Donovan brothers, who won silver medals in the 2016 Olympics for rowing. We were really proud of them. Like Ireland don't win very many gold medals or very many medals at all as a very small country. And so when we had chance of actually winning silver medals in the rowing, we were so delighted and so proud. And we were so proud of these lads because they're positive and friendly and not at all arrogant, and so very much loved for their attitude and their down-to-earthness, as well as their energy and enthusiasm. So I've got just a short clip here about them talking about preparing for the actual Olympic final. And this was just after they had won the semi-final, and they were talking to somebody here from the Irish News about getting ready to do the final. So I've got a few questions here, comprehension questions, which actually should be quite easy, but the accent is difficult and they talk quite fast, so I wonder if you're going to be able to understand them. So this is the challenge, to watch this clip of Paul O'Donovan and Gary O'Donovan being interviewed just before their Olympic final, and answer these questions. So, what time is their race at? What does Gary think of the catering at the Olympics, and what does he like to eat? And what's their strategy for winning the final, or how are they going to try and win? What are they going to do? And then what's Paul doing just for the crack? So let's see if you can understand this short clip, 2 minutes of West Cork English. Let's try.
I think it's 11 o'clock tomorrow, isn't it? The final?
I couldn't tell you that, to be honest.
Talk to me about
half 10 maybe.
Talk to me about the hours. Talk to me about the next 22 odd hours then.
We go home now and get ourselves into a nice bed anyway. Cool ourselves down a bit after that and get a bit of steak. Yeah. The food is fantastic there. Like, you can have steak for breakfast, lunch and dinner with spuds if you like.
Have you no care pigs though?
There's an expiring bread. Yeah, we've had all sorts of stuff for breakfast, lunch and dinner.
So hard to make the weight?
They're only small boys. Yeah.
But listen to me, talk to me about tomorrow. Seriously, almost for a moment. Is it dream come true territory?
It really is, yeah.
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, we're taking it in our stride and we're enjoying it in one race at a time, I mean, there was no point in us looking ahead to the final because we weren't there yet. And now we can look ahead to it and get excited about it and just go as fast as we can.
And is that the O'Donovan game plan? Come out from the start and go as fast as you can, or is there a strategy?
I don't know.
A more complicated strategy.
It's simple enough, really.
Too complex, really.
No, just A to B as fast as you can go. Start to finish. Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
Must feel good though, as I say, a tough week. It's a great week for rowing. You'll be happy that you're doing so much, and Sinead and Claire are doing so much, and even Sunita has done so much to promote your sport.
Yeah, it's brilliant, I mean, anything we can do for the sport, we love the sport, and we're getting great publicity now the past week with the Olympics and everything, So I think it's fantastic, and I think this is the first time ever we've had more than one boat in an Olympic final in rowing.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. Really.
The World Junior Under 23 and Senior Championships are on in Rotterdam at the end of the month, so the team are training at home for that at the minute. So it's nice to have a good bit of buzz and a bit of momentum rolling for the team as well leading into that. So you're going rolling that, Paul, as well, aren't you? I will, yeah, for the crack. Why not? Listen to me very finally. Thoughts on tomorrow. Thoughts of what you might achieve.
It's hard to know, you know. Yeah, we're just going to go out and go as fast as we can, try and win it. Whatever happens, and we'll be happy, you know.
Yeah, he said it all there. We'll do our best. I know you will. Listen, congratulations. You've done so much to improve the mood of a nation that's been finding it hard to watch the Olympics. Best of luck tomorrow, lads.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
So did you understand that? I hope so. So what time was their race at? Did you get that? And what does Gary think of the food at the Olympics, and what does he like to eat? And what's their strategy for the final, and what's Paul just doing for the crack? Did you get those questions? So the race is at 10:30 at 10:30. He said the food is fantastic. You can have steak for breakfast, lunch and dinner, and spuds if you like. Spuds or potatoes. What's their strategy for the final? As fast as you can go, start to finish, close the eyes and pull like a dog. And what's Paul doing for the crack? Well, he's competing in the Rowing World Championship in Rotterdam. That was just a few weeks after the Olympics. So I wonder if you got all those questions, if you were able to understand those, lads. Please write down in the comments box if you could, or if you couldn't, or what you thought about them. I'd love to know. So that's the end of my presentation. I guess maybe you're saying, well, what's the point? Well, I suppose I'm just trying to say, like, here in Dublin or anywhere over the world, there is no one standard English. Like, English is changing all the time, and there are so many different people speaking English in so many different ways. Yes, we have our standard written forms, but as soon as we speak, we have a wealth of different vocabulary and a different input from different languages, different cultures. And we find that here in Ireland as well. So variety is the spice of life. So thanks very much for listening. Please put your comments into the comments box so that I can get some feedback from you. It's great to be here. It's great that you're here. Thanks a lot. Bye.